Grace was excited and nervous as she waved goodbye to her parents at the gate of her new boarding school in Lagos. This was her first time away from home, and she felt both scared and thrilled. Her mom hugged her tightly, reminding her to behave well. "Be a good girl, Grace," her mom said, smiling through tears. Grace nodded, clutching her small suitcase, and followed the teacher to her new dormitory. Everything looked so big and different. She wondered if she would make new friends. She was about to begin an adventure she did not expect. In the dorm, Grace met Sarah, her school mother. Sarah was an older student who was assigned to help Grace adjust to life at the boarding school. Sarah was tall and confident, with a smile that made Grace feel safe at first. "I will take care of you here," Sarah said warmly, helping Grace unpack her things. Grace was grateful to have someone watching over her, but little did she know Sarah wasn't as kind as she appeared. The first night, Grace lay on her bed staring at the ceiling. The other girls in the dorm were talking and laughing, but Grace felt a little lost. She missed her parents and her familiar home. Sarah came over and sat on her bed. "Don't worry, you will get used to this place," Sarah said softly. She patted Grace's back and Grace felt comforted. "I will always be here for you," Sarah added. Grace smiled, thinking she had found a good friend. As the days went by, Sarah began to spend more time with Grace. At first, Grace thought Sarah just wanted to be close, but soon Sarah's touch made Grace feel strange. Sarah would hug her for too long or hold her hand in a way that did not feel right. Grace did not understand why it bothered her so much. She wanted to tell someone, but she did not know if anyone would believe her. She kept quiet, hoping things would get better. One night, Sarah woke Grace up. "Come with me," she whispered. Grace was half asleep. She followed Sarah to the corner of the dormitory. Sarah handed Grace some snacks. "Here, eat this," she said. Grace was confused. "Where did you get this?" she asked. Sarah smiled slyly. "I took them from some girls while they weren't looking. It's fun. You should try it." Grace's heart pounded. She knew stealing was wrong, but Sarah's smile made it seem like a game. Unsure of what to do, she ate the snacks hurriedly. The next day, Grace felt guilty. She couldn't stop thinking about how Sarah had stolen the snacks. She did not want to be part of something bad. During break time, she noticed the girls from whom Sarah had taken the snacks. They looked upset. Grace felt even worse, but when she saw Sarah, the older girl just winked at her, making Grace feel like she was trapped in a secret she couldn't escape. The guilt began to weigh heavily on her small heart. One evening, Sarah came to Grace with an excited look on her face. "We are sneaking out tonight," she whispered. Grace's eyes widened in shock. "What? Sneaking out? Where are we going?" she asked nervously. Sarah grinned. "There's a party outside the school. Don't worry, it will be fun. No one will know." Grace did not want to go. The idea of leaving the school grounds terrified her, but Sarah was persuasive, and before Grace knew it, she was creeping out of the dormitory with her school mother. When they arrived at the party, Grace felt completely out of place. Loud music was playing and older students were dancing and laughing. Sarah was having fun, but Grace stayed in the corner, feeling scared and out of control. She knew she shouldn't be there. What if they got caught? What if something bad happened? Her heart raced as she thought of all the things that could go wrong. She wanted to go back to school, but she did not know how to leave without upsetting Sarah. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps approaching made Grace's heart stop. "Someone is coming," she whispered urgently to Sarah. Sarah quickly pulled Grace into the shadows behind a tree. They held their breath as the teacher walked past, checking the area. Grace's heart pounded in her chest. Her palms were sweaty. She realized how dangerous this was. If they had been caught, they would be in serious trouble. Once the teacher was gone, Sarah laughed it off, but Grace couldn't shake the feeling of fear. After sneaking back into the dome that night, Grace lay in bed wide awake. The thrill of the night had quickly turned into fear and regret. She did not want to go to any other party or steal snacks again. This wasn't the life she imagined when she came to boarding school. Sarah, on the other hand, acted like nothing was wrong. She even tried to joke about the party the next morning, but Grace could not laugh. She felt something was deeply wrong. Days passed and Grace struggled with the secret she was keeping. She knew Sarah's behavior wasn't right, but she felt powerless to stop it. Whenever Sarah came close, Grace felt a wave of discomfort wash over her. The unwanted affection and sneaky behavior made her feel trapped. She wanted to tell someone, but she feared that no one would believe her. She was just a little girl, and Sarah was older and more confident. What if Sarah got angry? Sarah kept acting like she was Grace's best friend, but Grace started to see things differently. It wasn't friendship, it felt more like control. Sarah always told her what to do, whether it was stealing, sneaking out, or keeping quiet about things. Grace did not feel free anymore. She felt like she was under Sarah's control. But Sarah's kindness confused her. Could someone be so nice and yet so wrong at the same time? Grace's head spun with confusion of it all. One afternoon, While sitting quietly in class, Grace noticed her teacher, Miss Adana, smiling at her. Miss Adana had always been kind to Grace, and in that moment, Grace felt a sudden urge to tell her everything, but fear held her back. What if Miss Adana did not believe her? What if Sarah found out? Grace felt trapped between telling the truth and keeping Sarah's secret, but deep down she knew she needed help. She couldn't carry this burden any longer. Grace found a new friend in class, a girl named Kemi. Kemi was cheerful and kind, always making Grace laugh. Spending time with Kemi made Grace feel lighter, and she started to realize she did not need to rely on Sarah. One day, Kemi asked Grace why she always looked worried. Grace wanted to open up but did not know how to start. Kemi's kindness made Grace feel safe, and for the first time, she thought about sharing her secret with someone her own age. One evening, Sarah noticed that Grace was spending more time with Kemi. She did not like it. "Why are you always with Kemi now?" Sarah asked. Her voice was sharp. Grace felt her heart race. "She's just my friend," Grace replied quietly. But Sarah seemed unpleased. "Remember, I'm your school mother. You should listen to me, not her," Sarah said. Grace felt trapped. She did not want to lose Kemi's friendship, but she also did not want to upset Sarah. The tension was growing. For the first time, Grace felt the urge to stand up for herself. "I can be friends with anyone I want," she said, her voice shaking but firm. Sarah looked surprised. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Grace was scared inside, but she knew she had to stop letting Sarah control her life. "I don't want to do these things you're making me do anymore," Grace said softly. Sarah's face changed, and for a moment, Grace thought she might have won. Sarah was angry. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" she hissed. Grace felt tears welling in her eyes. She did not want to hurt Sarah, but she knew she couldn't keep living like this. Sarah stormed off, leaving Grace standing alone. Sarah's heart pounded, but she also felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time she had spoken up for herself. It wasn't easy, but it felt right. After the argument, Grace knew she couldn't keep everything inside anymore. She found Miss Adana in the staff room the next day. Nervously, she approached her teacher. "Miss Adana, can I talk to you?" Grace asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Miss Adana looked at her with concern and nodded. Grace took a deep breath, feeling her heart race. This was it, her chance to finally tell someone the truth about everything. Sitting with Miss Adana, Grace slowly began to open up. Her voice was shaky and she felt scared, but she knew she couldn't keep it all inside any longer. "Sarah, my school mother, she does things that make me uncomfortable," Grace whispered, her eyes fixed on the floor. Miss Adana leaned in closer, giving Grace full attention. Grace hesitated for a moment, then continued. She told Miss Adana how Sarah touched her in ways she did not like, encouraged her to steal snacks, and made her sneak out for parties. As Grace spoke, tears began to fall, but Miss Adana listened patiently, never interrupting. When Grace finished, she felt a weight lift from her chest. Miss Adana reached out to her quietly, gently. She said, "Grace, you did the right thing by telling me," she said softly. "I'm so proud of you for being brave." Grace felt a small sense of relief, but she was still scared about what would happen next. Miss Adana reassured her, "I will make sure this is handled up properly. You don't have to be afraid anymore." For the first time in a long time, Grace felt safe. Miss Adana immediately took action. She spoke to the principal and explained everything Grace had told her. The school staff knew they had to handle the situation delicately but firmly. They arranged for Grace to be moved to another dormitory, far away from Sarah. Grace was nervous about the change, but Miss Adana promised that everything would be okay. "You will never have to deal with Sarah again," she said. Grace felt a mixture of emotions, relief, fear, and hope. At least now she had someone on her side. The next day, Sarah was called to the principal's office. She did not know what was going on, but when she saw the principal's serious face, she began to worry. The principal, along with Miss Adana, explained that they knew about her behavior toward Grace. Sarah tried to deny everything at first, but the more they talked, the more she realized she was caught. The principal told her that her actions were not acceptable and that there were consequences for everything she had done. Sarah was shocked and scared, realizing how much trouble she was in. Sarah was suspended from school for her actions. The principal explained that the school took such matters very seriously. Grace did not know how to feel when she heard the news. Part of her felt sorry for Sarah, but she also knew that what Sarah had done was wrong. It wasn't easy to hear, but Grace understood that Sarah's suspension was necessary to keep her and other students safe. It was a big step toward healing and moving on from the painful experiences. Grace was moved to a new dormitory where she was welcomed by the other girls. At first, she felt shy and unsure, but the new girls were kind and friendly. Kemi, her friend from class, was also there. She made Grace feel more comfortable. Slowly, she began to settle into her new life. Without Sarah's influence, Grace felt lighter and freer. She no longer had to worry about doing things she did not want to do. She could finally focus on her schoolwork and making good friends. It took time for Grace to rebuild her trust in others. Even though she was in a safer environment now, the memories of what happened still haunted her. She sometimes had nightmares about Sarah, but there were days where she had felt sad and confused. Miss Adana continued to check up on her, offering support whenever Grace needed it. With each passing day, Grace began to heal. She learned that it was okay to ask for help and that she wasn't alone in her struggles. Kemi became Grace's closest friend, and their friendship grew stronger every day. Kemi never asked too many questions, but she was always there to listen when Grace needed to talk. They spent their free time playing games, studying together, and laughing about little things. With Kemi by her side, Grace felt she could finally be a normal kid again. Kemi's kindness reminded Grace that not everyone was like Sarah and that there were good people in the world who truly cared about her. As the weeks passed, Grace reflected on everything that had happened. She realized that what Sarah did to her was not her fault. For a long time, she had blamed herself, thinking she had done something wrong by not speaking up sooner. But now, with Miss Adana's help, Grace understood that she had been a victim of someone else's bad behavior. It was a hard lesson to learn, but Grace knew it would make her stronger in the future. Grace began to feel more confident in herself. She started speaking up more in class and participating in activities with her new friends. She also learned the importance of standing up for herself. If something did not feel right, Grace knew she had the right to say no and to tell someone she trusted. This newfound strength gave her a sense of control over her own life. Grace was no longer the shy, scared girl who let others decide her fate. One day, Miss Adana asked Grace to share her story with other students. At first, Grace was nervous. She wasn't sure if she could talk about what happened in front of others, but Miss Adana explained that Grace's experience could help other girls who might be going through something similar. With Miss Adana's encouragement, Grace decided to give it a try. She stood in front of her classmates and told her story about how she had been mistreated, how she had felt trapped, and how she had finally found the courage to speak up. Grace's story touched the hearts of many students. Some of the younger girls even came to her after the talk, telling her how brave she was. One girl in particular confided in Grace that she had been feeling uncomfortable with something happening to her too. Grace knew she had done the right thing by sharing her experience. She had helped others find their own courage. It was an emotional moment, but it also made Grace feel proud of how far she had come. Though Grace was doing much better, she still had moments where she felt sad or guilty about the past. Miss Adana helped her to understand that it was okay to feel those emotions. Healing takes time, Grace, she said gently. Grace realized she needed to forgive herself for not speaking up sooner. She had just been a young girl scared and unsure of what to do. Now that she had found her voice, she could move forward without carrying the weight of the past on her shoulders. As the months passed, Grace grew stronger and more confident. She excelled in her studies and made new friends. The fear and confusion that had once clouded her mind were slowly fading away. Grace learned to trust herself and the people who truly cared about her. She no longer felt the need to rely on others to guide her through life. Instead, she became a leader amongst her classmates, someone who could be trusted and respected. Grace had come a long way from the scared girl who had arrived at the boarding school gates. Grace and Miss Adana developed a special bond. Miss Adana became more than just a teacher. She was a mentor and a source of guidance for Grace. Whenever Grace faced challenges or felt unsure, Miss Adana was always there to provide support and encouragement. Grace knew she could rely on her, and that made all the difference. With Miss Adana's help, Grace learned the importance of having someone trustworthy to talk to. It was a lesson she could carry with her for the rest of her life. Toward the end of the school year, there was a big celebration at the boarding school. Grace was excited to take part in the festivities. She and Kemi joined the other girls in decorating the school for the event. There were games, dances, and delicious food. As Grace looked around, she realized how much her life had changed since she first arrived. She felt happy and proud of herself. The dark days with Sarah were behind her, and she now surrounded by friends who cared about her. One day, Grace received a letter from her parents. They told her how proud they were of her and how much they missed her. Grace smiled as she read their words. She hadn't told them everything that had happened at school, but she knew that when the time was right, she would share her story with them too. For now, she was just happy to know that her family was thinking of her. The letter reminded her that no matter what, she had people who loved her unconditionally. One evening, as Grace and Kemi were talking in their dorm, Kemi suddenly grew quiet. Grace, there's something I need to tell you, she said. Grace looked at her friend with concern. Kemi explained that she had been going through something similar with an older girl, but she had been too afraid to speak up. Hearing Grace's story had given her the strength to share her own experience. Grace felt a rush of emotions, sadness for her friend, but also pride that she had helped Kemi find her own courage. Grace felt a deep sense of responsibility to help Kemi, just as Miss Adana had helped her. "You're not alone, Kemi," Grace said softly, holding her friend's hand. "We'll tell Miss Adana together." Kemi nodded, tears in her eyes, but she seemed relieved. Grace remembered how scary it was to share her own story, but now she understood the power of speaking up. The next day, they both went to Miss Adana. With Grace by her side, Kemi found the courage to explain what had been happening. Miss Adana, as always, listened with kindness and promised to help Kemi just as she had helped Grace. As Grace and Kemi walked back to the dorm, they felt lighter. Kemi was grateful to Grace for supporting her, and Grace felt proud of herself for helping her friend. It was a moment of growth for both of them. "I don't feel scared anymore," Kemi said, smiling through her tears. Grace smiled too. "They were stronger together," she said. From that day on, their friendship became even stronger. They knew they could rely on each other no matter what challenges they faced. After Kemi's situation was handled, the school decided to make some changes. They introduced more support systems for the students, so no one would ever have to feel alone or afraid. Grace noticed how things were becoming better and safer for everyone. Teachers held more meetings with students, encouraging them to speak up if they felt uncomfortable or unsafe. Grace realized that by sharing her story, she had helped the school become a better place. It felt good to know that something positive had come out from such a difficult experience. As the school year came to an end, Grace reflected on how much she had grown. She had faced fear, confusion, and sadness, but she had also found courage, friendship, and strength. Grace knew that she still had a lot to learn, but she was no longer the same shy, unsure girl who had arrived at boarding school. She had found her voice, and she knew how to stand up for herself and others. As she packed her things to go home for the holidays, Grace felt proud of how far she had come. The future felt bright, and she was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead.